Good evening, I'm Sharon Thomas. This is ITV News London. Victims of child abuse in Lambeth's children's homes are claiming that racial discrimination is preventing compensation from being awarded equally, claims Lambeth Council denies. A survivors group has secured a total of more than £46 million in compensation. Our senior correspondent, Ronke Phillips, has been speaking to some of those affected.
Yes, abused or raped or whatever it was by the staff.
He spent more than 5 years of his childhood in Lambeth-run care homes, but he wasn't looked after. From the age of 10, he was sexually abused by at least 5 different members of staff.
More than 5. My social worker, St Thomas More's, Red Hill, Eastbourne, Shirley Oaks and Southville. I think about 6 or 7 people. 2 of them was women.
Now in his early 60s, this man, whose identity we have concealed, is one of hundreds claiming compensation from the Lambeth Redress Scheme. The council, which was at the centre of one of the capital's worst child abuse scandals, set aside more than £100 million for children who suffered abuse in its care homes. But groups supporting the victims say the scheme discriminates against black claimants.
Well, it's clear for us. We've got all the figures. We know what compensation has been paid to our members, and it's clear that black residents and survivors are getting paid less. It's just a factual matrix. We can see, we've seen the figures, we can demonstrate it, and we've explained this to the council.
And this prominent lawyer says black victims are also at a disadvantage because assessors are reducing compensation for victims whose parents were diagnosed with a mental illness.
Because of racism, many black parents were assumed to have a mental illness, and their children are then assumed now to have a mental illness because of their parents, not because of the trauma that they suffered in Lambeth homes.
So, and there is another way in which the black applicants are being discriminated against.
Well, because of racism, black children were not expected to achieve educationally and therefore would not get a successful career and therefore would get less compensation than their white applicants.
This man has been offered £125,000 in compensation for abuse which started when he was in a nursery run by Lambeth and continued when he was sent to Shirley Oaks in Croydon. He says it's not nearly enough.
I feel as if there's not enough compensation for the mental abuse alone in my head for so many years, for, 30, 40 odd years.
These victims say they just want to be dealt with fairly. The compensation money will never wipe away the memories of what they've suffered, but knowing they're being discriminated against because of their race makes it worse. Ronke Phillips, ITV News.
In a statement, Lambeth Council said it is recognised that racist attitudes were widespread in Lambeth's former homes, but it is untrue to say that black applicants are not being adequately compensated. They say all compensation payouts are based on precedents derived from settled common law principles. The redress scheme also has an independent panel to review compensation awards. The man who was Housing Minister just before the Grenfell Tower fire didn't reply to letters warning of inadequate fire safety regulations. Today, the inquiry into the fire heard how Gavin Barwell ignored those messages, some from the late MP Sir David Amess. Here's Rugs Martell.
I do solemnly...
He was warned about fire safety before Grenfell.
Shall be the truth.
Gavin, now Lord Barwell, was the government minister responsible for housing the year the fire happened. In the days after the tragedy, he stayed silent.
I can't comment, I'm afraid.
Could the deaths at Grenfell be avoided?
Key to his role before Grenfell, the many warnings he was given by a group of MPs. Headed by the late Sir David Amess, the all-party parliamentary group on fire safety known as the APPG sent Barwell a total of 7 letters warning him that fire regulations needed to be made safer. Lord Barwell never replied.
I mean, obviously, very tragically, David is no longer with us. But one of the things that I think is probably worth saying, just to help the chair and the panel in appreciating this APPG correspondence, which I think is a very important, it's kind of a warning that was missed in this process. There were clearly problems with the department's system for handling correspondence. I think the PPG writes to me a total of 7 times, and I only ever see 3 of those letters. So 4 of them just go missing.
Lord Barwell told the inquiry he had planned to meet Sir David Amess about his fire safety concerns in person, but a general election was called and the meeting never happened. But he did admit the government underestimated fire safety concerns before Grenfell.
The government had a completely false picture of the level of fire safety, but it wasn't just the government. This wasn't an issue that was being raised by the opposition. With the exception of the APPG, it wasn't being raised by backbench MPs. I wasn't being asked about it in Parliament. I wasn't being asked about it by the media.
Tomorrow, the most senior politician to appear at the inquiry, Eric Pickles, the then Secretary of State for Housing, will give his evidence. Rags Martel, ITV News, at the Grenfell inquiry.
On to sport now, and Arsenal defender Leah Williamson has been named as England's captain for this summer's European Championships. The Lionesses open their Women's Euro campaign against Austria on July the 6th. Williamson has called it an incredibly proud moment for her and her family. Meanwhile, Arsenal's woes continue as it's confirmed that defender Kieran Tierney is expected to miss the rest of the season because of a knee injury. The problem happened in training ahead of last night's 3-0 defeat to Crystal Palace, which dented their chances of qualifying for Champions League football next year. And finally, Charles Dickens' novels have been read and loved around the world, with the author's first book, The Pickwick Papers, achieving phenomenal success, partly due to its illustrations. And today, the Charles Dickens Museum opened its exhibition about the novel that propelled Dickens to the big time. Martin Stew has been to see.
So through here is the exhibition space.
Following in the footsteps of a London literary icon.
Talk a little bit more about the history of the Pickwick Papers.
Celebrating the book which first made Charles Dickens a star.
So this is really exciting. This is actually an original manuscript page from the Pickwick Papers. We learn a lot about London. Historians will actually read Dickens' novels to kind of get a feel for what it would have been like to live in the 19th century in Dickens's period. You know, when we think of the Victorian period, a lot of people think of kind of Dickensian London. So he really is synonymous with the time.
It all started with this novel, which paid for this house.
When they first published it, the first monthly part, they sold about 400 copies. By the end, they sold 40,000 copies each month. So this was a massive jettison into international fame for Charles Dickens.
It was translated around the world.
So this is dedicated more to Moronjune's own illustrations.
These sketches by an Italian artist show how the characters were imagined around Europe.
Down this end is when we talk more about Pickwick clubs.
In London, the book won a cult following.
So this here is a Pickwick Club minute book from 1837. There were lots of fan clubs that got set up in honour of the work. They named themselves after Dickens' characters, so you've got Snodgrass, Mr Pickwick all featured.
And from the look of the handwriting, they were having a good time whilst discussing it.
They were. So you can see that the more and more they were talking, there's a couple of nice kind of drink stains on this particular page, the more unsteady the handwriting comes as well.
School kids these days may be more familiar with Mr Scrooge than Mr Snodgrass, but Dickens' dynasty started right here.
So he's still inspiring people now.
He is.
Martin Stew, ITV News.
Now, it finally felt like April today, didn't it? Here's Holly with the forecast.
Making the most of it, whatever the weather. Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Good evening. Today brought some sunshine. It was mild, but it was also probably the best day of the next few. The winds are picking up into the coming days, tomorrow, Thursday as well. Some showers, some longer spells of rain, but still some bright weather to be had too. But also our temperatures are falling away. So at the moment, we're in a mild air mass. Tomorrow, around this low, we've got some heavy, potentially thundery, blustery showers feeding our way. This feature could bring us to start Thursday. This clears through, but in its wake, you can notice that colder air mass with us for the tail end of the week. Possibly some wintry showers, there's still a lot of uncertainty, but also some colder nights, I think, to come as well. Out there at the moment then, yes, we've still got this mild air mass in place, some cloud coming and going, and then it thickens towards the end of the night, and that's thanks to a weak weather front, just bringing a touch of patchy rain, but it does lead to quite a different day for tomorrow. So some sunny spells at times, but showers are never too far away. They could be heavy, they could be thundery, they could have a bit of hail in them, and the winds will get strong and gusty in and around these showers too. Temperatures lower than today, and when you factor in the winds, it will feel, I think, pretty different to today. Take care.
Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
A marginal improvement in the weather. That's it from us. We are back on air tomorrow from just after 6 o'clock. We'll see you then. Good night.